Hey, welcome back to our channel. I'm Jared from 3C's Recreation, and I've got Braxton helping me today. We have a STACYC. This is a 16eDrive. It's the bigger wheel version. This is the older bike, and it has the older motor that has like the fuse inside of it. This customer's experienced their motor failing, and they keep blowing fuses like crazy. To even get to this, we have the housing that normally wraps around all of this stuff right here in the middle. All you do is you take out like the eight screws out of the side, take the side of the cover off, and then this side then falls down. But normally it sits like this, and then your fuse packet is just under there. So before you buy like a different motor or anything, you can just check your fuse to see if it's blown. But this bike, as soon as you put a new fuse in it, it's blowing the fuse within a couple seconds. So we're going to replace this motor with the new brushless motor kit. There's a ton of features to the new motors. They are 20% more powerful, 10% more efficient. There's no fuse. It's a brushless design. It's supposed to run a little bit cooler. Just an overall better package. Obviously, as the bikes are newer, they're going to come out with better technology like that. So we'll show you first what comes inside the kit. So we'll open it. You got the directions on the top here. You've got new housing for the new motor design, a little more venting as well. There's nothing inside that compartment, and then it's just the motor. It should be inside this one here. Let's open this up for you guys. So this is our whole new assembly. We're going to install this on this bike. And it's all plug and play. It's just a matter of getting to it. This is all going to plug in. There's a bunch of wires that are coming down from the top here. They're going to plug in. This is where our battery plugs into. So it's pretty simple and straightforward. The first thing that we have to do, I guess we've already kind of started this project, and the fact that we've already split this side and we've got the footwell out of the way. But to get the sides off, the footwell had to come out. So we've already taken that off. There were 2 screws in the bottom of that, one on each side. And the next thing we're going to do is we need to take the brake off, and we need to take the chain off. So we'll jump right into that. So the first thing we're going to do is get the brake so we can pull the wheel off the back. This is all going to stay with the wheel. Inside of here, you can see I'm looking across the bike. There's our brake line that comes back. We've got a set screw that holds that, and then we have our jam nut that keeps the brake tension on the brake cable. And then we have one screw here as well. So we've got one screw in the bottom, we've got this screw on top, and then we have the jam nut for the brake. That'll release the cable on that side and release the bracketry from the frame. And then on this side, we're going to unscrew this to get pressure off of it. We're going to loosen our rear wheel axle. We'll slide it forward, get the chain off the front here, and then we can take the whole wheel assembly right off the back of the bike. And we have to do all this because we need to slide this motor out the back. And also we're going to we'll transfer our sprocket over to our new motor. Alright, so we have an 8mm in the back, and we have either a Phillips or an 8mm in the front. We'll loosen this one up. And then the nut and the washer on the back we'll take off of there. On the bottom of here, if we kind of look underneath, if you bring the camera down lower, we have right here, we have our 10mm that is holding the tension on the brake cable. And what I will do now is we're going to marker that so we know kind of where it was before. And that way when we're putting this back together, we have a ballpark for where our brake cable needs to be. So we'll loosen this up to get the cable out. But that marker was just to help us for reinstalling. Now that that's out, this can all kind of hang here. So now that we got the brake cable bracket loose and down out of the way, we now have our brake drum that we have to release from the frame. There's going to be one more 8mm nut on the back side of this. And then on this side we're done other than loosening our rear axle. So we're going to loosen this brake drum screw next. The next thing we're going to do is loosen our chain up, our chain tensioner. That way we can slide the whole wheel assembly forward to get it off the front sprocket. We can now use two 15mm wrenches to take our rear axle off. And now we can slide this whole assembly forward. And that's going to let us get the chain off the front. You can slide the chain right off the front sprocket there. And now this whole assembly is going to come right out the back of the bike. So we got our brake drum, our chain, our tensioner, and everything is still one assembly. And now we're going to be able to get this motor, we're going to unscrew it and pull it straight out the back of the bike. So now that our rear wheel is out of the way, we have to unscrew the motor so we can slide it backwards to disconnect the wires up on the top here. So we have two screws on each side. They're flat heads. They're 4mm hex heads. So we're just going to slide this in here and unscrew both of these screws on both sides. There's 4 total. So now that we have the 4 bolts undone on the motor, we can slide this whole assembly backwards. So I'm going to push it back. And then this exposes our pack of wires here. So all of this stuff on this side of these connectors is an assembly, and we're going to slide this out and get rid of all of this. So you can see here, if you come in a little bit closer, you can see there's 2 different packs of connectors that we're going to release. We're just going to pinch them and separate them. We'll pinch. So you have to pinch the sides and then pinch the top. So, and they are different size connectors, so don't worry about which went where, because they're different sizes. So now all we have to do is pull this motor assembly out of the back, and we're going to have to kind of wiggle and fit our drive system down through there as well. So, the first thing we have to do is transfer our sprocket over from the old motor to the new one. And being a dirt bike shop, we have, this is like a clutch holding tool. I can set it right, it has these nice prongs that'll fit right on the sprocket. So we'll set it right there. And then this is the same size 4mm that the engine bolt motors had. So we can easily unscrew this. Be careful because there is a washer on top of this, and you can see it's grooved. So when we reinstall this, we have to make sure that the groove lines up here. And we'll get our groove lined up nicely there. We'll get our new washer set on there. Then we're going to re-Loctite this. This had blue Loctite, so we'll put some of that back on there now. You can see it's on the threads. Alright, with our new sprocket installed, we can feed this whole assembly right up through. And we're going to start with our electronics that go in the front. And we want to make sure that our motor, the sprocket, has to be on that side of the bike. So this is kind of how it's going to sit once it's reinstalled. So just going to start fishing it up through there. Alright, so now that we got our new motor slid halfway up, we want to pause here for a second so we can re-hook up our cables. So we got to fish those out of the frame here. And you don't want to pull on them too hard. There's not going to be a lot of room to work with. You just have enough room to get them hooked up here. So we've got the bigger one here. We're going to hook back up. And then we have the smaller one that will hook up as well. So now that we have both of our electrical connectors hooked up, we can kind of slide those up in out of the way. And we can continue to slide our motor up in. It just takes a minute to make sure you have all the wires how you want them. And we'll slide this the rest of the way forward. Make sure nothing's getting pinched, everything's routed nicely, everything's got a little home for it. So now what we're going to do is we'll re-Loctite these 4 rear bolts and we'll get those inserted. So now that we have our motor reinstalled and the 4 bolts holding that on, we can go ahead and reinstall the rear wheel. And as we took it off, the chain is still on the rear sprocket, and we're gonna set this plastic guard on it because you're gonna fight with it a little bit, probably the least fun part of this job. And you can see in there, I've got the chain laying in the channels like it's gonna be put back on. And this is kind of where you're gonna fight just a little bit, because now we gotta get the axles to line up in the slits in the frame here, and then at the same time we got to hold this chain up. So you kind of just have to be patient with it, and we'll slide this forward, and again trying to keep everything where it needs to be. There we go. So this plastic piece is holding me up here, so now that we got the plastic piece, so now I pushed the axle all the way forward in the frame, that way I can fit this front sprocket over. So now I got the chain over the front sprocket. Now we can pull back on this and get our chain tension where it needs to be. For now, we're just gonna lightly tighten our nuts on here, just to kind of hold it still. We'll adjust the chain here in a minute, but we'll get the brake side stuff all on first before we adjust the chain. So now we're on this side of the bike, and we got our brake drum, and we have to realign this and at least get it tightened up to the frame here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna slide it in, and again, we're not gonna tighten this. So now that we got our brake drum at least on, we can do our chain tension first. We wouldn't wanna tighten this until our axle nut is tight, because if we tighten this, it won't let this slide back to adjust the chain. So we're just gonna loosely tighten this just to hold the brake drum where it needs to be. And now we're gonna set our chain tension. So we'll do that here. So now that we have our chain tension where we want it, we can go ahead and tighten down the rear axle nuts. These are just a 15 millimeter, so we'll tighten this down next. With those being tight, we can now go ahead and tighten our brake drum bolt here. The next thing that we'll install is going to be our brake bracket for the brake cable. And again, that just like reverse order, it goes up underneath. Kind of using the same bolt that we just used, we're just going to add a second nut and a second washer to that. We can now re-screw our brake cable into the brake hanger there. We'll tighten the jam nut against the bracket so that way it doesn't come undone or loosen up and change. And now that that's done, we can come to the bottom of this, up underneath, and we can reset our brake cable. And we had marked on it last time where we wanted it to be. And it's important to try to set it back to the same until you go to test it. And this is where you'll have to fine tune it. Now that it's back together, you'll have to actually check the brake once we get the motor reinstalled to make sure that the brake is set properly for the little guy to ride it around. I'll just give it a test by hand here to see. It feels pretty good now, but once we get it down on the stand and move it around, we'll ride it and see how it feels, but it feels good there. All right, so we're getting really close. These are our last two pieces to kind of pinch everything together. They're the new ones that came in the kit. They're the brushless decals on them, and there's a lot more ventilation in these ones. So we'll start with the bottom one, and you can kind of see the grooves where everything's gonna fit in. You're gonna wrestle with it. That's just kind of all there is to it. There's no science to it. It's just trying to get everything to fit like you want it to. You kind of wiggle stuff around until it really feels good in there. And once you kind of get everything smushed in there, make sure all the cables, nothing's being pinched, everything's got good routing. You try to bring the top in, you gotta line everything up. And it takes a little while to do this, so you just kind of work it back and forth, try to get everything lined up. And the biggest challenge is gonna be trying to get this piece to fit in its home like you need it to. All right, so now that that bolt's in, we can go ahead and put our footrest on. There's just two 4mm bolts in the bottom. We'll take this off and we'll slide it right into place here. All right, we got our brake adjusted, our chain adjusted. We've got the motor reinstalled, all the bracketry, the footrest is on. So now we'll reinstall the battery for the little guy. We'll just slide it right into its spot, click it in. We can turn the key on. Key is on. It's in power level 1. This little rider's ready to go. This was Jared from 3C's Recreation. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe to our channel. I appreciate it. Have a great day.